Hello and welcome back to Authentically Shawna. I'm your host, Dr. Shawna Berk. This is the last episode of season 1. This is episode number 36. I wanted to take this episode and use it as a way to answer some questions about what the process is like to have a podcast, what I'm using, how I'm doing it, and use this episode as a little sneak peek as to what is coming up in the fall, both podcast wise and what's coming up for me business wise. So before I get into any of that, I wanted to say a huge thank you to every guest who joined me on this adventure. I had 22 guests on this season, which is so wild to me. I really can't believe that it happened. Had wanted something like this to happen. I'd wanted to have guests. I was having a conversation with my friend Lindell, shout out to Lindell, who I've been going to dance classes with, and I had spoken to her at a very critical juncture, I would say, in deciding what I was going to do with the podcast. And I remember having this conversation with her saying, I don't think anyone's going to want to be on this podcast with me. I mean, I think I could convince some of my friends, but outside of that, I don't really know that many people. How am I going to find guests? Who's going to want to be on this with me? And it's just turned out in such a beautiful way, in a way that I couldn't have planned or predicted. But this podcast has been such a blessing for me this past almost year. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone who said yes to being a guest, because it's not easy to come on and talk about something. And so thank you for saying yes. And thank you to sharing your knowledge with us being myself and the audience, because I think this is really how we shift the world, is by sharing what we know and making it accessible to others. And that's such a big calling on my heart, and something that I'm going to keep doing in many ways. More to come. I wanted to answer the questions of how are you doing this? So I think we're in a really interesting time and era, because I think creating, especially in a podcast format, has never been easier. And so I wanted to share the simple tools that I'm using. So I am not doing anything fancy. I'm using, and again, this is not sponsored anyway, I'm using Rode, R-O-D-E, and I will link all of these products in the show notes. But when I record, I'm using their Wireless Go 2, which is a lavalier mic. So it's not a big, heavy microphone. They're these tiny little lavalier mics. The 2 comes in a 2-pack, and then I have the third box, which is the receiver. So I have 2 transmitters and a receiver. And instead of having people wear a lavalier, what they've created is a microphone adapter for it. So you stick the lavalier into an adapter and it looks like a microphone. So it slips in handheld, and then it has a screen over it. And then I stick that. There's a certain size that fits, which in the Rode system is called RM5. It's a mic clip. And I put that mic clip onto their desk stand. I have 2 of those. And the only other thing that I use is a connector, because I actually record my podcast on my cell phone. I'm old school. I have an iPhone 8, and they have a cable, which you'll just need to look into whatever cable you'll need for your phone. This is what works for mine. And that's it. That's my whole podcast setup. I have a mobile podcast studio. So if you don't know this about me, I am currently working as a physical therapist. I'm a mobile physical therapist, meaning I don't have a clinic. I don't have a space. So when I conceived how I was going to do interviews, I knew that I didn't want to do interviews only virtually. Now, some of my interviews are virtual because people don't live close by. People who did live close by, I really wanted to be in person. I think there's nothing quite like recording in person. And so I was trying to figure out a way to do this. Do I rent space? What does that look like? And it ultimately came down to, well, I mean, I already go into people's houses to do physical therapy. Why can't I just go into people's businesses and homes to record the podcast? And that's what it's become. So my podcast is a mobile setup. It is only audio. And again, when I show up to someone's studio, we just set up these mics really quickly. I record my podcast in a software called Riverside.fm, and I will also link that. So I have that app downloaded on my phone. We record, and I mean, there's been a couple times when there's been technical glitches, but basically I press record and that's the episode. I've had to go in and alter a few things very rarely, but pretty much when we press record and we start the podcast, it's just a straight go. I think that because of technology, it is so easy to go in and do things, edit things if they need be. So one of the things that I really like about Riverside is when you go in and edit. So I can't edit on my phone. So I record the episode on my phone and then I need to go to a desktop to edit the episode. The episode is written out in Word form. So it's a text script. And if I need to edit something, I can just go in, highlight those words and delete them, and it deletes it from the audio. So again, I am not an editor. When I first started this, Lindell, I had said, Shawna, you got to figure out a way to do this on your own, because I was thinking that I would need to get a editor. And she said, Shawna, you got to figure it out on your own. It's like, if she's an amazing creator. If you're going to create, you got to figure out in this first iteration how to do it yourself. So that's why I use Riverside. It's truly so easy. And then in order to host a podcast, you need someone to put it out into the interwebs, which I don't really know how that works, but I'm going to say interwebs. So Spotify hosts podcasts for free. So as long as you have a free Spotify account, which I have, you can host your podcast through Spotify. And then from there, you can host it on other platforms. So Spotify is my main platform. Once I put it on there, they send it out to other platforms should you want to. So I have myself signed up for Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So those are the two broadcasts that I put out every week. And once I put it onto Spotify, it automatically sends to Apple. So that's so lovely. Really, this process could not be any easier. I take it from Riverside, I download it, put it on the back end. It's called Spotify for Creators. Type up a little summary, press send, and I'm good to go. If you want to host a podcast, I'm telling you, this is the time to do it, because I don't think it could get any easier. And I'm not technically super savvy. I'm not an editor by any means. I've just figured out the basics. And when things present themselves, I look on YouTube and I figure it out. But again, I'm in no way technology or editorial wise extremely proficient. I've just figured it out as I go along. I also wanted to say that in my interviews, I ask people questions ahead of time. So I write out questions that I think conversation that's the direction it's going to go in. So there's been a few episodes where I've specifically asked people, hey, I'd love to talk about this. Can I send you these questions and can we chat about it? So an example that would be my conversation with Brianna Rose. I really want to talk about energetics. I know she's such a master at energetics and wanted to have her come on and explain what all of these, I think sometimes niche words mean and our meanings. And so that's one type of episode that I've had. And then the other type is people have something that I think I want this idea shared out into the world. And so I'll go on their website or their Instagram and figure out what their messaging is and then put that into questions so that we can chat about it. And I think that's also really lovely as well. So those are the two types of episodes besides my solo episode of either I'm coming up with this idea that I'd love shared in the world, or someone has an idea and I'm figuring out how to get that shared in the world. And I think either way, it's so lovely. And I think if you're wanting to start just experimenting, I mean, I'm an experimenter at heart. I love experimenting with things, and sometimes experiments go well and sometimes they don't, and you kind of figure it out. And I think that's what this is for me, is it's been a really lovely experiment. And the only other thing that I wanted to say about a podcast and starting a podcast is I think it's ideal if you can get a thorough grasp of what people are doing in the world and how they're doing it. And that I feel has come pretty organically for me and just working with people. So I'll give an example. So Dr. Aiden Seraphim, I took his meditation class and then asked him. So after hearing him talk about meditation for weeks, then I asked him to be on the podcast. And we'll say Dr. Mala is another great example. I went and took a workshop that she had, and then I did my interview. So sometimes I would say it's great to get to see people's work and hear how they talk about it themselves in long form, which I know probably can't happen for everything. And it hasn't happened for me in every episode, but I think there's something really lovely about that, about getting to experience someone's work. Being in their space, I think, is another great way for me to understand people on a different level, is understanding the work that they're putting out in the world. I'll say, like Tanya, for example, Tanya Claire, she's a stylist. I got to go to her space and when I went, she has racks of clothing and I got to then try on clothes and she got to dress me. And so I got to be in the experience of that. And then I think that lends to a really great conversation because then I understand more of what she's doing and how that's going. And so if you're interested in a podcast, figure out ways to experience people's work maybe, or I know that's not always possible, but figure out a way to connect with their work so that when you interview them, you have some common ground, something that you can hold on to. And yeah, I really think that that's what's, for me, made some phenomenal conversations. I'll also say that this podcast has connected me in ways that I had been really wanting to connect with other people. For example, I'd been saying, I really want to join a book club. And Brianna Rose is in a book club. And I said, can I join your book club? And she said, absolutely. So now I get to see her at book club, which is so wonderful. Had been really wanting to like go to a Shabbat dinner. I went to Shabbat dinners in college and that was so wonderful. And I met Tanya and I went to Shabbat dinner with her on Friday night. So I feel like for me, this podcast has not only been this vehicle where I get to share information in a way that I feel really strongly about, but it's also been a really lovely way for me to connect with people and keep connecting with people outside of this one interview. And I think what's so beautiful about these conversations that I've had is they feel like the start or an invitation. So I get to have these lovely conversations. And then again, not with everyone, and we're in different places and spaces and people have different things going on, but with definitely certain people, this has been such a lovely invitation to having more conversations and continuing the conversation once we stop pressing record. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined me because it has been such a pleasure and I have so loved getting to sit and listen and be involved in the conversation of things that I feel really passionate about sharing all of these ideas. And it brings me back to this idea that I learned when I was in France. I worked at a summer camp in France for a couple summers, and one of our directors said, when you're creating something, make sure you have a red thread. The red thread is the idea that there's connection points amongst all things. And for me, this podcast has been my red thread for the past year. I feel like I see so much of my life through this podcast and through this red thread and all the connections. I think this podcast has just been a way for me to express what's been going on in my internal world externally in such a beautiful way, in a way that I had hoped for. I feel that it turned out even better than I could have even imagined it to be. And it's just all these small nuances that have made such a big deal in my life as they've added up cumulatively. And so I can't wait to keep doing this. I am taking a break. So this is the last episode of the season and I will be back in September. I already have a list of people who want to connect and in this way. And for whatever reason, like schedules didn't work out or timing didn't work out, but they're coming. And I plan on sharing more of the practitioners who I work with and continuing to share other people in my area and ideas that I want to share on the world. And I think that's what's really wonderful about this as well, is it's mine and I get to create and produce and do what I want, which is so, so amazing. I haven't had something where I've gotten to create it for myself and be the creator of something in a long time. And it feels just so good on a soul level to be in a creative space again. And I had never produced anything prior to this podcast. I've always wanted to be on the performing end of things or on the, I'll say, non-back end side of things. And this is my first go at it. And I'm really loving this role. So if you've never produced anything, or if you're thinking, oh, I don't know how to produce, you do. We all have, I think we all have this like inner producer in us, and mine is definitely coming out. And yeah, I can't wait to see what comes down the pipeline as this continues to unfold. And speaking of coming down the pipeline, I wanted to tease what is coming up for me in the fall. And I think one of the big impetus for me to create this podcast and something that I'm really passionate about is information sharing. I think this has been a idea and thread I've had for a long time. I saw a cousin of mine recently and was telling her what I'm about to tell you all. And she said, Shawna, this is exactly what you've been talking about for the past decade. And it sounds like you are finally in a space where you get to create that. Like you've spent the past decade finding and searching and seeking information so that you could create this, what I'm currently creating. And it's so true. I really have a passion for taking information that I think could be common knowledge and isn't common knowledge and making a way for it to be common knowledge. And part of that is this podcast and sharing, again, things that have helped me on my journey and things that I think would help lots of people on their journeys, whatever that journey looks like. And so what I am doing is I am launching my own membership. I'll start chatting about it again in September, and it will start in October. And in this 6-month membership, every month you will learn a new wellness technique. And these are wellness techniques that are essentially only taught to practitioners, not because these particular techniques couldn't be utilized by everyone, but the creators of these techniques were practitioners. And so they're only teaching other practitioners. And while I think absolutely portions of their techniques are meant only for one-on-one and for practitioner guidance, these techniques that I'm going to be teaching are not that. And I feel really strongly that seeing a person, a practitioner one-on-one, whether you're seeing someone in more Western medicine or Eastern medicine or any of the medicines, I do think that the one big hole that we're missing is how to be well. And I feel that people like Dave Asprey are doing that and they're calling it longevity work, which I think that's great. I think that's such a valid word as well. But I think what is missing is what do we do in between visits? And I think in our minds, I'm saying ours as like a collective, is I'm going to see a practitioner for a very specific reason, which is fantastic. But no one is teaching us or teaching anyone how to be well in between these visits. And how do we do things at home so that we're pushing the needle a little bit every day so that when we go see a practitioner, they get to work on this deeper level, on this very specific thing, as opposed to trying to help you figure out all of these things that are coalescing all at one time. So that's my goal, is to teach these techniques so that people know how to take care of themselves in between visits. Now, please don't take this as me saying, don't ever see a practitioner. Practitioners aren't teaching anything. That's so not it. But a one-on-one practitioner visit is not a time to learn a technique that's going to take you 30 to 45 minutes. It's just, that's not it. As a practitioner, I don't have time to do that because I'm seeing someone for something very specific. So I also recognize that in my own one-on-one practice, I don't have the time or the ability to teach these things. And I really want a venue and an outlet to do that. So that's what's coming down the pipeline. So what that's going to look like is we're going to meet every night. We're going to meet every Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be an hour Zoom. So you can do this from anywhere. I'm going to say in the United States for this first go round, because I'm going to be shipping supplies. And if you, what I will say is, if you live in the continental US, please join me. I will send you supplies and we will meet up virtually. In 1 hour, you will know how to do this technique. You will have a replay so that if you missed anything or you're unsure, you can go back and watch. There will also be written instructions, and I'll have a couple office hours through the month so that if you have a question that isn't answered, I can answer that for you. And if you want to join the higher tier of this membership, we will meet up once a month one-on-one and chat about how to implement that into your life on a more personal level. So I am so looking forward to this. This is something that, again, I think has been building up for the past 10 years. And I feel that I have the techniques. I have the ability to technologically do this now, because 10 years ago it was a whole other world. So I feel like the technology is all lining up. And I really feel that this is what I want to be doing in the world, is sharing information and helping other people help themselves in a way that isn't being taught right now anywhere. I don't know anyone who's teaching these techniques in this way. So I am so thrilled to be doing this. And stay tuned. If you are following me on Instagram at Dr. Shawna Berk, I'll link in the show notes so that you can keep following along. I'll keep putting out little things throughout and a way to sign up. But if you are only listening to the podcast, there will be some advertisements coming up on next season about this launch. And I'm so excited about what is to come. I don't even know what's to come. I think that's the fun part about all of this is I have these ideas, kind of like this podcast. I have this idea. I'm just going for it and we'll see what unravels and how it all unfolds. I think that's what happens with everyone is you have this idea and you go for it and you see how it unfolds. And so I am so looking forward to seeing how this all unfolds with you all. Thank you so much for joining me on this first part of the journey. I so appreciate all the feedback everyone has given me and the support. It truly means the world. And I can't wait to keep producing and to keep making connections. And yeah, being a facilitator of ideas is such a big calling for me. So thank you for being here and witnessing this. And yeah, just all of the love and support I've gotten. It means the world to me. So this is me wrapping up season 1 of the Authentically Shawna podcast. You've been listening to Authentically Shawna with Dr. Shawna Berk. The information contained in this podcast is provided for information purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products or techniques referenced in this podcast, consult your healthcare provider. Please go back and re-listen to any episodes that you have missed in season 1, and we'll catch you back here in September.